I see. Well, with us on the line is Tom Mohrman, the Director of Marine Programs with the Nature Conservancy for Mississippi. Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good morning to you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right.
No, you got it. Thank you very
Good.
much.
With a first name like Lucien, you get sensitive to how you pronounce people's names because I imagine you get all different versions of that.
Oh, most definitely. Whenever I have a telemarketer call, they pronounce it a wide variety of ways.
Yeah.
But you were spot on. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us. Tell us a little bit about this Save Our Shells program.
Sure. So first off, I'm with the Nature Conservancy. We're a nonprofit organization. We have offices and programs in all 50 states. And in Mississippi, our focus is on freshwater, forest, and coastal programs. So I manage our coastal program. And one
And
of
are
the
you here
projects
in
that we have.
Mississippi?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I'm on in Van Cleve is where our main office is, and my program features along the three coastal counties.
Okay, well that's great. And so your focus is what's happening in the Mississippi Sound. That's sort of a big piece of it.
Exactly. So the Save Our Shells program is an effort to recycle oyster shells, and what that essentially means is collecting shells that would otherwise be discarded and sent to a landfill, and collect them and repurpose them for conservation and restoration of oyster resources in Mississippi.
And so where, I suspect some people know how an oyster becomes, it ends up on your plate, but can you tell us a little bit about sort of the process of everything that happens before it's brought out to us on ice?
Sure. So in Mississippi, you can have an oyster harvested from a wild oyster reef, or you can have it farm raised in an aquaculture facility or aquaculture farm. Uh, those oysters are collected and brought to restaurants through commercial and uh, farm harvesters, and those are served at restaurants. And after those are served to a consumer, they are discarded traditionally into the trash. So,
And so the shells just normally end up headed to a landfill.
yeah, we estimate there are approximately 5 million oyster shells shucked annually in Mississippi, and all those
Wow.
shells are going to a landfill. And the value of that resource for oyster restoration is the best place to grow a new oyster is on the shell of an old oyster. When oysters reproduce, they put larvae in the water. They float around for a couple weeks, and when they get triggered to descend, they'll sink, and the thing they land on is where they stay for the rest of their life. So what you end up naturally having are clusters of oysters growing on top of each other over time, forming a reef similar to a coral reef in a tropical environment. So these are areas that are high in fish production, invertebrate production. So you have lots of crabs and shrimps and other things, and they become attractants for fish and wildlife.
Do they, and I'm probably going to embarrass myself with a dumb question, do they grow a new shell, or is it sort of combined with the shell that's already there, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, so when an oyster larva settles out of the water, it basically lands and starts forming a brand new shell. So it's taking nutrients in from the water to create a new shell. But over time, about 2 years or so, it will mature and be the size of an adult oyster.
Okay. And so this program, the idea is that principally restaurants would take those shells and collect them, and then do those come back to you all? Is that how that would work?
Yes, sir. So we're going to hire a collection contractor to go around and collect the shells from restaurants. So they're an incredibly important part of this because they have to take it from the consumer side and take it and separate it out, make sure plastic and paper and food isn't mixed into it. And then we'll go ahead and collect that material, and we're going to deliver it to the Department of Marine Resources so they can be incorporated into various restoration projects, with the goal to keep all those shells in the state of Mississippi, put them back in the Mississippi Sound, where they can be a substrate or a surface area for new oysters.
That's great. So this will be done in conjunction with DMR. They'll be the ones who actually figure out where to deploy the oysters. I mean, the shells that have been collected.
We're working to get that figured out in an agreement, but the hope of that at this point is to put those shells back to the state, working with the Department of Marine Resources as a partner there. One of the challenges for oyster conservation and restoration in Mississippi is a lack of suitable locations for new oysters to grow, and that's why you need to put the shell back into the water, because those are places where new oysters can end up growing and creating new habitat or new food for consumers to eat.
That's great. And you've already got some big restaurant partners lined up on the coast, is that right?
We haven't officially enrolled anybody in yet. We're waiting until we get some contracts in place, but we've got the Beau Rivage, BR Prime signed up to participate, White Pillars in Biloxi, Keg and Barrel in Ocean Springs, for example, and the Shrimp Basket, which has multiple locations. So those are some folks that we've already talked to and done some social media vignettes with, so that we can help promote this program to other restaurants.
Well, that's great. Do you have a sense of how the oyster industry is doing right now? I know they've had a lot of tough hits over the course of the last few years. I mean, how is our environment for oyster growth?
Well, the last couple of years have had a couple environmental issues come to bear, namely the opening of the Bonacary spillway, which released a large amount of fresh water into Mississippi Sound. And oysters can tolerate fresh water to a degree. So like the typical seasonality or I wouldn't call it chronic, but we do get freshwater surges pretty regularly, kind of on the large scale. But when you have freshwater for 6 months and longer, basically what happens is an oyster closes up its shell as a defense, and it doesn't eat. So they essentially starve to death. And that's kind of what happened there. So I think we're in a recovery phase from that. So it's going to be the next couple of years to see what kind of production we end up on the wild oyster reefs.
And I know the Save Our Shell program doesn't address the salinity problems from the Bonacary, but I assume that creating more environments for oysters to grow will help us have healthier crops of oysters and hopefully increase the volume and health of what we're getting.
Yeah, it's a strategy we would recommend, to not put all your eggs in one basket and diversify the locations of oyster reefs throughout the state. So when an incident happens in one part of Mississippi Sound, it may not necessarily affect the whole state. So you have a resource in some other location that can serve as a seed spot for future oysters for recovery.
And am I right? There'll be or maybe there has been, but is there a formal announcement of the program coming up?
Yes, sir. So we're going to be working at the 7th annual Oyster Cook-Off in Biloxi at Point Cadet this Saturday. We're going to be collecting oyster shells, and we'll have a announcement around 1:30, kind of setting the stage for the beginning of this program. So we'll be giving away some T-shirts and some other TNC branded swag, and hope to see people out there. But our main mission is to collect the oyster shells that will be shucked as part of the cook-off, and collect those and cure them over about 6 months, and hopefully deliver them to where they can be put back into the water to create new oyster habitat.
That's wonderful. And tell us again, when and where will that opportunity be?
So it will be the 7th annual Oyster Cook-Off. It is in Biloxi at Point Cadet on Saturday, March 25th.
That's wonderful. Well, Tom, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We've had Tom Mohrman of the Nature Conservancy here to talk about the Save Our Shells program to hopefully have even more oysters coming out of the Mississippi Sound. Tom, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.